Hi, Spring Athletes. My name is Nicole Adach, and I am a mental skills coach. I work for St. Mike's in a lot of different capacities. I work with a lot of different teams and individual athletes and coaches on campus. So I might look familiar to some of you guys and girls, but to those of you who don't find me familiar, I want to just give a brief introduction of who I am, what I do, and ultimately why you're watching a recording of me. So I'm a mental skills coach. I actually went to St. Michael's College from 2009, 2013. I was a basketball player at St. Mike's. I then graduated in 2013 and I stayed at St. Michael's to receive my master's degree in clinical psychology. So I have been exposed to St. Mike's in very many ways. While I was getting my master's degree, I was a resident director. So I was an RD in Lions. So I've seen St. Mike's as an undergrad, as an athlete, as a student, as an employee, as a graduate student, and now as a consultant. So I've seen the school in a lot of different ways, and I have a pretty good understanding of how the school works and what it's like to be on campus and what it's like specifically to be an athlete on campus. So that's my own personal background. So my master's degree in clinical psychology essentially allows me to practice therapy in the state of Vermont. I'm a psychotherapist. And so I have this mental health background, the clinical background, and then I also have the sport background, which has led me to the field of sports psychology and the work as a mental skills coach. Again, a mental skills coach, for those of you who don't know, I essentially work with athletes of all levels to determine what their best version of themselves looks like, and then how to ultimately be that version of yourself as often as possible. And obviously that shows in performance, shows in life off the court and field. And I love what I do. It's all of the mental components of sport that I've found to be really the pieces that make or break the great athletes. So things like self-talk, confidence, focus, ability to refocus, mindfulness, setting goals, motivation, all of those things take mental skills. And so I help athletes, one, determine who they are as athletes and people and what they ultimately want to achieve. And then we talk about how they get there. And then ultimately, after deciding what they are and what they want and how to get there and why it's important, we talk about the obstacles that get in the way. So what things deter us from reaching our potential? Things like losing confidence, things like losses of games, things like getting distracted and not being able to get back on track. All of those things happen. It's inevitable in sport and in life. So as a mental skills coach, I pride myself in being able to put the puzzle together with my clients to determine what are those areas that get in our way, those obstacles, and then how do we overcome them? You're all pretty familiar with the situation right now with the coronavirus and our need to be inside right now and away from our friends and some family, from our school, and we're dealing with a lot of obstacle right now. So today I have a presentation that I put together. I'm not a PowerPoint girl, but I put together a presentation so that we can at least start the conversation about what this loss has been like for all of you, what you're going through, how you're coping, and then ultimately what we can do about it, right? So what mental skills can help us overcome such a big obstacle. I'll be the first person to say that in my work as a mental skills coach, I have never worked with a client who, until now, who has had a whole season taken from them because of a virus. But I have worked with clients who've dealt with setbacks and things that happen out of their control that ultimately dictate a year and a season. And so I'm familiar with working through obstacles with my clients, but this is unprecedented for everyone. So if you're feeling lost and unsure of what the heck's going on, you're not alone. So if it were ideal, I'd be in person with you all. Actually, if it were ideal, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But it's actually a really good time for us to be able to have a conversation about this. And so what I'm gonna do now in a moment, I'm gonna switch the screen so that you're not gonna necessarily see me. You're gonna see my presentation and you'll hear me talking over the presentation. And I might switch back and forth between my face and the screen, but if I can be off camera, that's great. So I'm really hoping that this conversation is useful for you all and that you're able to do some self-reflection and deep diving to determine who you are, right? What obstacles are standing in your way right now, coronavirus to name one, and what we can do to still get better despite this awful circumstance. So I'm gonna share my screen right now so that you guys can see the presentation. It's gonna come out a little I don't want to say funky. It's going to be interesting because I'm on my iPad. So you might see like 1.5 slides at a time, but bear with me. We'll work through it together. Now you know who I am and you see my face. So for the next, like, I would say 35 minutes, I'm just going to go through the presentation. And then I want to note as well that there's going to be an opportunity for follow-up and feedback. I think Monday is the day that we're going to talk about, or I'm going to give the opportunity for us to talk about what I presented, what questions you might have for me, what concerns you might have, what you're struggling with, what you're going through. And so it can really be a chance on Monday. It's going to be a live interaction on Zoom. I'll have an invite and I'll have Josh Kessler send out the link. It's going to be a chance for all of us to chat about the experience and what we're going through and how to ultimately get through it together, because this is tough times that could not be predicted by anyone. So I'm here for you guys. We'll have a follow-up conversation where I'm not just a voice and you're not just listening to a presentation, because this is my least favorite kind of interaction. I'm not a professor. I want this to feel like it's helpful and interactive. And unfortunately, given the circumstances, it has to start with the presentation. So bear with me for this 45 minutes. I hope this is helpful for you all. I've put a lot of thought into it. And to be honest with you guys, I haven't stopped thinking about you since we heard news that the coronavirus is impacting us as much as it is. So hang in there. Try to take what you can from this presentation. If you want to pause it right now and grab like a pen and paper, I am always taking notes on pen and paper. So feel free to do that. I think this presentation is going to be available for you all, but just in case it's not, or if questions come up that you want to ask me on Monday, please have something that you can write. Maybe it's your computer, whatever, something that you can write these questions down so that we can discuss further moving forward. So with that being said, we're gonna kind of move into the presentation segment of this, but I hope it's helpful for you all, and think of any questions you might have for me. All right. So now I am just finding my presentation. Perfect. Okay. So we're gonna see two slides at once. So again, today's conversation is all about experiencing loss in sport and what that's doing to us and what that means for us. And we're at a time right now where it's, it's pretty unprecedented, like I said, and it's leading to a lot of themes that I like to go over with my clients anyways. So this is a good opportunity for all of us to be able to kind of reflect. So experiencing loss in sport, one thing that I like to do with all of my clients is to recognize, as athletes, you've all been through loss at some point. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. You've all been through loss at some point. You've all experienced setbacks, disappointments, difficulties. We've all lost games at one point or another. We've had bad calls, bad plays. We've made mistakes. We might have missed an open teammate. We've all dealt with crappy situations. Spring athletes in Vermont specifically, you guys have dealt with snow and forecast changes. I mean, today is March 24th. And we've had a blizzard in Vermont. So, not a blizzard, but we've had snow in Vermont. So you never know what to expect. So as athletes, I want you guys to begin to like prime your minds and really recognize all that you have been through before, and how when you experience loss in sport, it's pretty inevitable. Like, you're gonna experience loss from time to time. Again, maybe not as massively impactful as this coronavirus has been, but you've experienced loss and setbacks and difficulties. And so it's my role as the mental skills coach here to help you train your brain to start to look for the opportunities in each setback, not just staring at the setback and thinking how awful it is, but to really be able to look at the situation objectively and think, I wonder what opportunities lie ahead. I wonder what I can actually get out of this experience instead of just all that I'm losing. What am I gaining? So that's just food for thought, something to start to think about. And I'm gonna go back to the presentation right now, but it's something to start to, consider as you navigate this difficult time. Okay, this is gonna be weird. Done. Okay, sorry guys, I'm just trying to get to the iCloud drive. Perfect. Okay, so experiencing loss in sport. So finding opportunities, setback, we've talked about that. All right, hide that next slide. Tough times make tough people. It's no secret that we're in a tough time right now. This is an extremely tough time for all of us. And we're all in this together. But I think it's really important for you all to recognize that there's a lot of hardship that's coming into our lives at this time, and we're missing a lot from what makes our daily lives normal. But it's important to recognize this quote: tough times make tough people. Without the tough times, we wouldn't really have the opportunity, see that word opportunity, we wouldn't really have the opportunity to become tougher. So again, all those losses we've experienced as athletes, the setbacks, the difficulties, the 6 a.m. practices, the training sessions that are really hard in the weight room, hard practices, coaches yelling at us, these tough times have really helped us as athletes become tough young men and women. And that's something that this coronavirus is giving us, which sounds kind of weird to say that the coronavirus is allowing certain things, but the coronavirus time and self-quarantining or social distancing, whatever way you want to describe it, it's creating toughness in all of us. So it's our choice whether or not we want to see it that way. But I like to start with this quote because it's true. Anything that we've been through that's been tough has led us to be tougher. So here's the first of many photos of you guys, the athletes. So Josh Kessler was kind enough to send me photos of you all in your sports, playing your games and your sports, and really doing your thing. And so I like to use photos of you guys to essentially illustrate what I'm talking about in this presentation. So I'm sorry that I don't know all of you, so I'm not going to know names for all of you, but this first photo, baseball player. Here he is, up to bat. All right, the first thing that I see in this photo is a tough athlete, and I'll explain why. The first thing I'm noticing, I wish I could zoom in, but I don't think I can. I'm not even gonna try. But the first thing I notice is his extra layers. He's wearing a hoodie under his uniform. Probably not ideal, which tells me that, again, spring athlete, state of Vermont, cold weather, that's tough. That's a tough situation. So he's building toughness when he's playing baseball in the cold. I'll share a quick story. I have an athlete that I work with who's an obstacle course racer. So his season's in the summer. He loves competing in the summer and doing his obstacle course thing. And so we devised a plan for this winter. He's trained outdoors all winter in negative temperature. He's been carrying tires up and down his street. He's been lifting heavy weights and having to walk distance with it, all in the frigid cold. His hands are freezing. And you know what that's doing for him? That's building toughness, because his ideal situation is 70, 80 degree weather. Baseball, probably 60, 70 degrees is much more comfortable than 50 or below. So my obstacle course racer is building toughness because he's learning what it's like to compete and to do his thing in not the best of conditions. So this athlete here, this baseball player, not the best conditions, but he's learning to still hit the ball even despite bad circumstances that he can't necessarily control. Another piece of the puzzle that I see second is what I believe to be, it looks like a major ankle brace. Maybe I'm wrong, but when I see this, I'm seeing a tough situation, an injury. Nothing tougher for an athlete than an injury that sidelines us. So for this athlete to be grinding despite having an injury, that tells me that he's built toughness. This is a tough athlete. Oh, how do I get rid of this now? Wow, undo. There we go. Okay, another tough athlete. Softball player, similar sport. Why I think this depicts a tough athlete is because, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but in a position like a pitcher, maybe you're not a pitcher, maybe you're just throwing the ball, but when you're throwing the ball, eyes are on you. It's up to you in this moment to make a decision that's going to help the team. Eyes are on, pressure's on. You're dealing with a lot of pressure and distractions, noises, maybe moving pieces, and you have to make a quick decision that works for the team. So using skills like self-talk and being able to focus and refocus, working hard despite the circumstances, that's a tough athlete. Again, tough times make tough people. These are two tough people. Okay, this is the quote that my mother gave me when I graduated college. She framed this, and it's actually, if I wasn't on this share for you guys, or screen for you guys to see the presentation, you'd be able to see this, but I have it framed on my bookshelf behind me. And it says, the values learned on the playing field how to set goals, endure, take criticism, risks, become team players, use our bodies, stay healthy, deal with stress. Those things prepare us for life. Now, when I was an athlete, when I was a basketball player, I didn't care about the life lessons. I'll be honest. I did not care. I wanted to go shoot hoops. You know, I wasn't worried about, oh, but I'm learning how it is to work hard and deal with stress. No. I want to shoot with a higher percentage. But it's really important for you all to recognize that who you are is these things. These values that you're learning now are going to stay with you throughout any circumstance, in any situation. They're always going to be with you. And that's something that, again, our experiences as athletes really uniquely sets us up to be successful for. So I just like this quote to start with it because, again, we learn different skills and different qualities about ourselves through our sport, and it's important for us to reflect on those things and remember them. So here are two photos. And I like these photos because I think of them as two depictions, again, illustrations of mental skill use. So the first photo, men's hockey, goalie. So the first mental skill I see is ability to focus. This guy's got to be zoned in. If he's not, that puck is going right by him. You've got to be ready for the next play. You're always thinking ahead. That takes a lot of mental skills. This guy, defense, he's learning to watch out for, defensive player. He's looking at to watch out for his goalie. He doesn't want to leave the goalie alone. He wants to help out. He wants to do his part. And the goalie knows, hey, I got my teammate in front of me. And his teammate says, hey, I got my goalie behind me. They're learning what it is to work as a unit. That's a skill. This offensive player looks like Stonehill. Not that we want Stonehill to score here, but it's really important to recognize that this offensive player is going up against two players here, and he's still willing to take the risk. He's still willing to endure stress and difficult situation to focus on getting that puck in the net. So these athletes, yes, they're performing as hockey players, but more importantly, they're performing with their mental skills. So again, using these different skills, self-talk, focus, dealing with stress, teamwork, all of those things are really being shown in this photo. And now if you look below to the next photo, women's field hockey, look at Nell, looks so happy. What I see in this photo, I see four athletes coming together and celebrating one another. They're celebrating their team. They're recognizing the importance of connection. I see some physical touch here. That's really important to recognize, hey, I see you, I hear you, great work. Nell's smiling, that's awesome. She's showing that she really cares about her teammates, and they're coming together as a unit. That's something that, again, the sport world really does a good job of teaching people the power of being together. And in a time like this, you know, we're all in this together and we're experiencing what it is to be together. So it's a unique experience for all of us to be going through this, but it's also shared. So keeping that in mind, connection is huge. All right, before we talk about athletic identity, I want to just kind of dive into what identity is in general. So I'm going to go back to myself for a second. Okay, so identity is essentially how we see ourselves in the world based on who we interact with, what we do, what we stand for, any affiliations we might have, what we participate in, relationships we have. Identity is how we understand ourselves. And identity begins to be developed in adolescence. So this period of time between ages 12 and 19, I will stop for a moment and just let you guys know, for my master's degree, my major paper was on athletic identity and how we psychologically formulate our identities and create those identities in our heads, and then how that then plays out in our athletics, and then ultimately how our identity is shifted and changed and disrupted when seasons end, when careers end, when we're forced to no longer do the things that we identify ourselves with. So just want to kind of let you guys know that I've researched this area a lot, and it's something that I really find fascinating and really important to talk about, and that not enough people talk about. So identity alone is something that is developed in between the ages of 12 and 19. That's adolescence, technically, psychologically speaking. So, you know, some of you guys, if you're first years, you're coming on campus and you're still in this phase of like, who am I in this world? And the reason why ages 12 to 19 is when identity is started to be developed is because that's the age range when people are actually able to begin to conceptualize who they are and who they want to be in the world. So that's just when it begins. It's not the ending of identity, like 19 and then we know who we are. No. But it's the beginning of actually being able to conceptualize, who am I? What do I stand for? What's important to me? what do I want to do here while I'm alive, while I'm here on this planet? So consequently, and not even consequently, but I guess more coincidentally, age 12, 13, that's the age that we're beginning to identify ourselves. And it's also the age in sports when we have to pretty much decide, do I want to be dedicated to the sport? Am I really into it? Do I really want to be something? I know for me, when I played basketball, age 12, 13, that's when we start going to exposure tournaments for colleges, 12 years old, 13 years old. And so the same time that I'm choosing, yeah, I want to give 100% of myself to my sport, that's the same time that I'm able to finally understand who I am as a person. So it's really easy for us to identify with what we do, not who we are. So for me, I identified with being an athlete because that's what I did. I decided I needed to give 100% of myself to my sport or else someone else was. And if someone else was, then I was going to lose. So I really learned without having to be, explicitly taught that what I did, play basketball, was my identity. So I just kind of wanted to clear that. And now let's go back to this presentation. Okay. So here we are. So the reason why that photo there, the Alice in Wonderland quote, "Who in the world am I? Oh, that's the great puzzle." I love the story of Alice in Wonderland because it's a lot about identity and who Alice is and who she should be, who she wants to be. So again, identity is shaped and shifted in that stage of adolescence. And we begin to develop what I consider subjective reality. So subjective reality is the belief that all of our realities are a little bit different and subject to change based on our own experiences. So that's one of my favorite phrases in the world, subjective reality. We all have different truths. We all have different experiences of life. And based on those experiences, we shape who we are and who we think we are. So that's identity. Moving on to athletic identity. Athletic identity is the degree to which an individual identifies with their athlete role specifically. So athletic identity is really how much the person identifies with what they do. So there's kind of this range, and I'll go back to the slide in a minute, but there's this range from like, yeah, I'm a lacrosse player, period. And then there's the people who are like, well, I'm 17 years old, I play lacrosse for X high school, South Burlington High School. And I'm also, my favorite subject is math. My family is really important to me. I have a lot of friends. I like to go to the movies on the weekends, etc. Two very different people. One person, yeah, I'm a lacrosse player. And the other person, yeah, I play lacrosse. Those are two very different experiences of the same sport participation. So the person who says, yeah, I'm a lacrosse player, period, that person has a very high degree of athletic identity. So who they are is determined by what they do. Those people, there's pros and cons to both. Those people who have that like really high degree of athletic identity, those are the people who, when that construct and that sport is taken away from them, it's really hard to understand who the heck they are beyond the sport. So those are the people that I call, and I hate to say it, but I call them red flag kids. I was a red flag kid. I describe myself as a basketball player and that's it. Period. So when my career ended, I was heartbroken, devastated, lost. But it also led me to really be disciplined and work my butt off for my sport so that I could be the best version of myself. So there's good and bad. Then the person who just plays lacrosse, not just plays lacrosse, but identifies as more than just a lacrosse player, they're more likely to really excel in school, have a lot of friends, balance their time, also work hard in their practice and when they're training, but also other elements of who they are. So two very different things. Different ways of seeing participation in sport, both can be helpful, both can be detrimental. So just again, to define what athletic identity is, it's the degree of which and to which an individual identifies as an athlete. So again, it's good for self-reflection to figure out where you stand on that spectrum. Are you the kid who just identifies as the athlete, or are you the kid or adult, or are you the adult who identifies as the student and the friend and the 21-year-old who also plays lacrosse and has a great time with their teammates, or are you just a lacrosse player and that's it? Because that's ultimately going to dictate how transitions go for you, how difficult times come for you. And this Corona time, I don't know if that's the appropriate thing, the way to describe it, but this time with the coronavirus and we're stuck inside and away from our sports, they've been pulled from us, the person who's highly identifying themselves through their sport is probably going to have a much harder time dealing with this than the person who has a lot of other elements of who they are. So it's important for self-reflection purposes to acknowledge who you are and be okay. Be okay with either one. But to understand, a lot of times people don't even understand this. So it's really important to begin to ask yourself, where do I stand? How much is my identity invested in what I do? Okay, I'm gonna go back to the presentation now. I wish there was an easier way to do this. Okay, athletic identity. Oh, this is an athlete, right? Don't know if he identifies as just an athlete or more, but there he is doing his thing. Okay, forced disruptions and transitions. So this is something that I studied a lot in graduate school, and it's really, really important to understand this. So this is for the athletes, not just the seniors, but for all the athletes who are experiencing some sort of disruption to their season. You guys have had a whole season taken away, and it's really unfair. But it's important to recognize that your experience of this can be different depending on a lot of different factors. So you'll see here, there's a list of factors. Again, I'm not going to read these PowerPoints bullet by bullet because that would be so very boring. But essentially, the degree, and I'm going to make sure Josh can send this to you guys, so I'll just go back to myself. Hi. So essentially, the degree of how abrupt the change was. So for you all, you guys were quite literally taken off campus and told not to come back abruptly, unpredictably, like you didn't know it was coming. So this change was majorly abrupt. That abruptness really impacts how we face this disruption, because if we could prepare for it a little bit more, we maybe wouldn't be so caught off guard and so distraught. So the abruptness of the change can really impact how you're experiencing this setback. Another thing that can really determine how you experience a setback is the degree to which you identify as an athlete. So your athletic identity. Again, if you're the lacrosse player and now lacrosse is taken away, this change is probably going to hit you a lot harder than someone who's like, yeah, but now I can focus on school and my friends and my family. It's harder. It's harder for someone whose sole identity as they know it is their sport. That makes the change and the disruption a lot harder to handle. And it's important to acknowledge that. Another thing, I keep looking over here, guys, because I have my presentation next to me. Another couple of things that are really important to consider is how ready you were for this change. So similar to that first abruptness factor, but how ready you are for change. Were you prepared for this? Truthfully, the answer is no. None of you were. I wasn't prepared for this. None of us were prepared for this. So when you're not prepared for something, it makes it a lot harder to be able to like accept it. And then there are things like, feeling a sense of like missed opportunities and like unfinished business. A lot of the athletes that I've talked with who were spring athletes at St. Mike's were excited for a season of revenge. Like the NE10 was not ready for us. Like these athletes worked their butts off. You guys worked your butts off all summer, fall, winter, spring. And now here we are, the time to finally show all the work we've put in, and it's taken away. That sucks. I know that's not like a helpful thing, but it's important to acknowledge like that sucks. Unfinished business, like we had plans and they were disrupted because of this coronavirus. And the more feeling of unfinished business that you have, the stronger that feeling is, the more likely that you're going to feel like it's unfair, this situation stinks, like we're going to start thinking could have, should have, would have. That's okay. It's natural and normal to feel that, and you're probably going to feel that for a bit, but that feeling of unfinished business is going to impact again how we face this type of setback. And then thinking about things that are out of our control. This situation very much so out of our control. We didn't control, the circumstance. We didn't control coronavirus. We can't control the fact that the NE10 had to cancel the tournament. The NCAA canceled everything. Like we had zero control over that. The less control we have, the more we feel helpless. So that makes this a lot harder to deal with. So again, acknowledging that helpless feeling can really lead us to have a hard time dealing with this transition. All right. So as I say that, we're going to kind of talk right about now what's going on inside for us. And that sounds kind of, hippy dippy, kumbaya, but it's important to recognize what's happening on the inside to us, or, inside of us, and then how that's showing up on the outside. So our thoughts and what's going on in our head, the conversation we're having in our heads, and what we're saying to ourselves, what maybe we're being told by others, what we're absorbing in our minds, it's important for us to recognize that and understand ourselves. We need to know that how we're feeling inside is okay. There's no wrong feelings. There's no wrong feelings at all. And it's important for us to acknowledge that. And then knowing though that those feelings and those thoughts, they impact how we show up. So this slide looks a little funky because again, on my iPad, but our thoughts are essentially what we say to ourselves, the conversation in our heads, the self-talk. It's a self-talk. Our self-talk is something that is majorly powerful and impactful. How we talk to ourselves directly impacts how we feel. Our feelings are emotional reactions, right? They just happen. And then how we feel directly impacts how we show up in the world, behaviors. When I work with athletes, sometimes I switch this word behavior to performance. Sometimes I use the word action. But essentially, again, going back to what I said on the slide before this, what happens on the inside impacts how we show up on the outside. Sorry, this is the only way I know how to erase. Okay, so some things that might be going on for all of you are thoughts like this. Why? This is such a sudden change that I couldn't do anything about, no control. You know, I have no identity. Will I ever be reunited with my teammates again? Will I ever play again? For you seniors, that's a very real conversation that's probably going on in your head. Like, will I ever be able to do the thing I love again? Those thoughts are all happening in our heads. And those thoughts directly impact how we feel. So there's a lot of feelings here, but there's a lot of different feelings that we could be experiencing right now due to those thoughts that we have. That's an arrow. So I'll just name a couple that are probably happening: frustration, disbelief, anger, devastation, stress, anxiety. All of these things can certainly be happening. There might even be a feeling of relief for some of you guys. You guys might feel like, it's actually a good opportunity to rest. Who knows? But it's important to acknowledge that there are a lot of feelings that are happening that are byproducts of what we're thinking. And then ultimately, what we're thinking and feeling dictates how we show up. So if you're someone who is saying to yourself that this is a sudden death of your athletic identity, of who you are as a person, now you can't show that off to the world, you might feel frustrated and you might feel anxious and stressed out and devastated. If you're feeling those things, you might find yourself closing yourself off to others, disengaging, not feeling motivated. That's okay. Again, this process is all very, very normal. It's normal for you to feel the way that you feel. There's no wrong feeling. It's really, really crucial that I talk about that. No matter what you're feeling, it's the right feeling, okay? We can impact how we get to that feeling, and I'll talk about that maybe on Monday when we have our follow-up. But essentially what we're saying to ourselves and the thoughts we have in our heads about this situation are going to impact how we feel and how we then show up. So if we're feeling devastated because we keep playing in our heads what could have been, what could have been, what could have been, and we're feeling devastated and lost and like we're suffering, we're probably going to want to be closed off for a while. Mom and dad are going to ask you, how you doing today? And all the right intentions, but you might explode. You might be like, shut up. I don't want to talk about it, right? Or you might feel just irritable, or you might feel sad and cry. All of those things are okay. The important thing here is to recognize what you're feeling and thinking, how that's showing up, and really allowing yourself space to process, because this is the major thing that we're processing here together. So it's really important to acknowledge that there's no wrong feeling and that they're just natural reactions to what we're saying to ourselves and what we're hearing those said. So it's really important, again, to understand yourself and understand what you're going through and understand what process you're experiencing so that you can know how you're showing up, and then ultimately how to take care of yourself, which we'll get to how to help with all this. Because if you're feeling all those negative feelings all the time, it's really exhausting and not helpful. And then if you don't feel motivated, you might stop trying in school. Not the best situation for you, right? So we're going to talk about different ways to kind of cope. But for now, I just want you to acknowledge the relationship between what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and then how we show up. All right, so I have a photo here in the next one. Nice little tennis player here. Let's see, let's find him. There you go. So obviously our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors that are in this slide here, those things impact how we show up right now as we're dealing with loss of a season, but they also show up on the playing field. So this tennis player here, I'm sure there are thoughts going on in his head, and I'm sure those have led to feelings, and I'm sure those then lead to certain behaviors. So if he's saying to himself, I got this, and then he's feeling confident, he's going to hit that ball and nail it, and he's going to win the match. Very possible. If he says, oh my God, this is the worst situation to miss the ball, he might feel a little bit more tight and he might hit the ball out. So how we think and how we feel directly impacts how we physically show up. So I just like this photo because I always like to wonder, what is he saying to himself? All right. Okay, something a little bit more educational. And again, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I do think it's really important to talk about the experience that you're all having right now, which is the experience of mourning a loss. So it's important maybe to frame this in the way of understanding the stages of grief. Okay, so stages of grief, there are 5 stages. There's no correct order of how you experience these. And you can honestly experience the stages of grief in any kind of order. You can go back to some over and over again. You can get to acceptance, yay, like not yay, but I understand this is the reality right now. But then you might hop back to the depression side. You might stay in the acceptance for a while and then feel like you're in denial all of a sudden. You're going to go through the gamut of feelings and emotions, and that's okay. But it's sometimes helpful to frame it in terms of grieving a loss, mourning a loss. So the stages of grief I found to be really helpful with athletes who have something taken away from them and that they have to learn how to kind of adjust to. So I'm going to go back to the slide for a second just so I can talk about it while it's in front of you all. Okay, so stages of grief. The first stage is denial. And again, there's no order here. Denial is essentially when you are pre-contemplative, some people call it, but it's when you're not even acknowledging the fact that this is happening. So when we first heard of Corona, we're like, no way, not happening. That sucks that like people are getting sick, but like it's not going to impact me. That's being in denial. I'll give an example of denial and not related to Corona. When I was an athlete, I was a senior, last game of the season at SNU. We lost the game. My parents were there. It was my last collegiate game. And I went up to the bleachers after my shower and was sitting with my mom. And my mom says to me, how are you doing? And it was the kind of how are you doing where it's not just like, how you doing? Or like, what's going on? Or that was a good game or tough game or sorry about the loss. But it was like, how are you doing? Like, I know this is your last game. How are you? And I looked at her, smiled, and I can recall this like no other memory. I literally looked at her, smiled, and said, I'm fine. That's not my last basketball game. And I was in this state of denial where I'm like, I'm going to play in Europe. I'm going to play in professional leagues. I'm going to continue to play basketball because it's who I am. It's my identity, right? I was that red flag kid. So all I was my sport. So when my mom said, how are you doing without basketball? I was in denial. I'm like, no way. I'm still an athlete. I'm still a basketball player. I'm going to continue to play. This is not my last game. Fun fact, that was my last game. So I was in a state of denial. So it's very normal for, times like this too, to really deny kind of what's going on around us. And that's why it's like the first stage of grief, because you're not even really ready to process it yet. And that's okay. And that might still be where some of you are. And again, that's okay. There's no wrong phase to be in, but it's really important to acknowledge where exactly you are. All right. So that is our first stage of denial. The second stage is anger. We all know what anger is. It's when our frustration gets the best of us. We're mad. Similar to my mom and my denial after our game, I remember a conversation that I had with my dad with anger. And with my dad, I remember it was after my senior season was over. I was on the phone with him. I was talking to some agents for, some European league. And I was all excited to tell my dad about it. And not that he didn't support it, but he was very questioning. He asked a lot of questions. And my anger got the best of me. I remember I was standing in Alio on the phone with my dad in the back doorway. And I literally said, fine, then I'll never talk with you about this ever again. And I hung up. And my dad's my best friend. He's been with me in this basketball journey since day one. But in that point of time, I was in that anger phase where I was just like mad that my basketball career could be ending, that maybe my dad saw that and I wasn't ready to see it. So I wasn't exactly denying the fact, but I was angry. So I was very irritable. So it showed up in aggression and frustration and, again, irritability. I didn't want to hear anything that didn't exactly align with what I was thinking. So anger can show up. For you all who are experiencing this loss of your season, it's okay to feel mad. It's okay to be pissed off that this is happening. I'm pissed off for you guys. To be honest, I'm in like this back and forth between accepting the fact that this is what it is and being angry for you all, because I'm the first people I thought of when this whole coronavirus, schools canceling, were you all, the spring athletes who've worked your tails off on end from last year until now just to have the season taken away. I'm pissed for you because I was so excited to see like a year of relentless pursuit of, you know, being able to prove to opponents that we're not messing around, like we're here to compete and to win. And I'm so pissed for you all that you have to experience this loss. It sucks. It sucks. So if you're feeling angry, rightfully so. There's a reason why you're feeling angry. Okay. And then if we go on to the next phase of grief, that's bargaining. And bargaining essentially is when we're kind of in the, oh, well, if only, you know, if only we stay, you know, if only we were to do something, then this wouldn't be the case. So starting to like, I'd do anything to get back on campus. I'll even, you know, you start kind of like asking what you could do in replacement so that you can get back to where you want to be. That's bargaining. So you're starting to recognize essentially that this is becoming reality. Depression is when you're upset, right? You're sad, you're not motivated, you're just really sad about the whole thing, you're crying. I'll give another fun example about myself because, you know, on my own case study. When I graduated college and, you know, I wasn't certain with what I was doing next, I decided to apply for the grad program at St. Mike's. And I had an interview with Ron Miller, professor here for psychology. And he's also like the head of the clinical psychology grad program. So I had an interview with him, and I had an interview with Lou DeMasi about being a resident director. So I had these two interviews that I went to, and I was like, well, whatever, I might as well just do this on the side in case I don't play. And my mom brought me up to St. Mike's for the interviews, and they went awesome. They went really well, good conversations. I enjoyed the conversations, but it was kind of just like a whatever to me. And no offense to them, to these people. And so I got into my mom's car after the interview and I burst out crying. Not many people burst out crying after a really good interview, but I did. And the reason why I did is because I was so sad that essentially I knew I was gonna get the job. I knew I was gonna get into the program. I knew I was gonna, that this is the next step of my phase of my life, next chapter of my book. I knew that it was happening. So I was in this like between acceptance and depression state where like I was just so sad that my basketball career was officially ending and that something else was going to take over, you know, for my life. And I was sad, and it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel depressed. It's okay to feel upset about this all. It's normal to feel that, to be honest. And that's one of those stages of grief and depression stages of grief that you're probably going to experience at some point. And then the last stage is acceptance. So not being happy with it, not being like, okay, yay, we don't have a season, but accepting like this is the reality, this is the new norm, this is what's unfolding for me. And it's not easy to get to that place. I would never say to any athlete I'm working with, whether it's a season ending because of the coronavirus or just because of retirement and career termination because of the end of a college 4-year career. I would never say to any of my athletes, like, just accept it. That's the worst advice. Like, just accept it. Hello, I've just given my all to this for years. Some of you guys, probably 20 years to your sport. Just to accept that a season's ending is really hard. Just to accept that the coronavirus is here and we're stuck in our homes, away from our friends and family, away from campus, away from our sport. It's not easy to get there. So that's why I like to kind of depict those 5 stages of grief, because it doesn't just happen overnight. It takes time and it takes a lot of processing. So as we kind of move forward in this new norm, recognizing where you stand in these stages and maybe what you need in each stage to help you get to the next one to ultimately reach that acceptance stage. But it takes time. It takes a lot of time. So don't be hard on yourselves if you're not accepting it. It's been a week. So I don't expect any of you really to accept it completely. And maybe you think you accept it one day and the next day you're really sad. That's okay too. You're going to go bounce back and forth between all these stages. And again, it's normal. So I just want to acknowledge that with you all and go back to the presentation. Okay. So those are the stages of grief. And I think it's just important to depict those with you all. And as I kind of continue to talk about this, I do want to say that based on the situation itself and how it was so unpredictable and out of our control, these stages might hit us a little bit harder, than any other loss, because we weren't ready to say goodbye to the season. The 2020 spring season never happened, so we never saw that coming. So these stages could be a lot more detrimental to us than we think. So speaking of detrimental to us, sorry for this really uplifting conversation, but what can happen? What can happen to us? A lot of things can happen. Again, depending on where you all are in the stages of grief and processing. So here, the stages of grief slide, and kind of what's going on in your mind and how you feel, those are going to impact this. But what can happen to us? We can start to experience some very real mental health concerns. Again, that's normal to feel stressed and anxious and depressed, to feel those things. It can happen, and it probably will happen to some degree to all of us. And I want to first acknowledge that it's okay to feel concerned, and it's okay to experience some of these depression, anxious, stress thoughts, but also that you're not in this alone. So please, if your mental health is a concern to you, if you don't feel okay, reach out to someone. If it's me, that's great. If it's your therapist at home, that's great. If it's Bergeron, your coaches, whoever it might be, talk about it, reach out about it. And we're going to talk about that with what can help. But it's really important just to acknowledge that, like, mental health problems may arise for some of you. And it could just be as simple as stress, or it could go beyond to the anxious thoughts, depression. You could have some severe mental health implications because of this. If you do, seek out help. Okay, it's normal to feel upset. It's normal to experience some sort of concern with our mental health. But if you feel like something's not right, you know yourself best. Please acknowledge that and honor yourself, and do what you need to do to help yourself. Okay, you're not alone. Another thing that can happen is this threat to ourselves, right? Threat to our identity. Again, the guy who says, I'm a lacrosse player, that guy is probably going to have a hard time understanding who the heck he is and what his purpose on this world is. And so sometimes that can happen with the end of a career, right? We can start to feel threatened, and like we don't know who we are, or why we're here, or what we can do, or what value we hold. The athletes who tend to identify primarily as athletes, those are the ones who have a bad game, and that stays with them for a day, a week, a month. They can't shake a bad game because their identity, their athletic self, didn't perform well. So if they don't perform well on the field, then they don't feel well as a person. So acknowledging that, especially if you have that high degree of athletic identity, that you're probably going to feel some sort of sense of loss to yourself. So you're going to feel like you don't know who you are. Again, kind of normal, but if you're feeling like you're having a tough time with that, reach out. And then maladaptive focus on negative and unproductive thoughts. So again, going back to this slide, acknowledging if you're focusing primarily on the bad stuff, right? And like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. I'll never play again. My season's over. My career's over. My identity's over. Why is this happening? If we're focusing on all that bad stuff, we're probably going to feel all bad feelings. And ultimately, we're going to show up in not the greatest way. And so first things first, it's okay to have that happen. Second thing to recognize is that if we're focusing on all the bad stuff, we're going to feel all the bad stuff. So being able to kind of shift our perspective is something that I'm going to talk about in a minute that can help us. But it's important just to acknowledge that can happen. And then finally, life changes. This is a major life change, right? This is something that we couldn't really anticipate, and again, couldn't really plan for. So we have a lot of free time now. We're stuck in our homes. We're with our families. Maybe we don't like being with our families all the time, right? We have a lot of free time that we're not used to. Athletes are used to structure, especially in the spring. You're all used to the shifting and changing of seasons and having a structure with practice and seeing your teammates and your friends and feeling connected. And all of a sudden we don't have that. That's really, really hard. So acknowledge that might happen. So I want to kind of now talk more optimistically about what can help us, essentially find our way and navigate through this tough time. So what can help? One thing that can really help is just being able to name how we're feeling and recognize and acknowledge how we're feeling. So again, the thought, feeling, and behavior slide about the connection between those three things is really important. There's actually research out there that says if you can name how you're feeling, it automatically dissolves that feeling a little bit. It's not going to take it away, but if you can acknowledge that you're feeling really defeated and helpless, That's the first step to starting to feel like you have some sort of control and you do have some sort of power over what's happening. Um, Again, it doesn't take it away, but if you can acknowledge how you're feeling and say it out loud with your words, that is the first step to understanding and knowing yourselves. So naming your feelings. I also encourage all athletes, again, I told you in the beginning of this presentation, have a pen and paper, write it out, talk about it to yourself or write about it to yourself, how you're feeling and what you're going through. Because the sooner you can name and honor how you're feeling, what you're feeling, whether it's in your heart, in your head, in your gut, wherever it might be, the sooner that you can name those feelings and how that's impacting you, the sooner you'll be able to honor that and then feed your needs. So you'll figure out what you need and then you'll be able to then problem solve. How can I help myself feed that need? How can I help myself get through this? But you don't know what to help if you don't know how you're feeling. So really important to acknowledge how you're feeling and be okay with it, no matter where you are in the gamut. Maybe you're relieved and you're feeling guilty about feeling relieved. That's okay. That is okay. This is the first time you get a chance to rest in years. So don't feel bad about being guilty and being relieved. It's okay. If you're feeling devastated and heartbroken and like you don't know how you're going to move on, that's okay to feel that. Feelings can't be wrong. That's the best part about them. You know, we always try to correct our feelings, but ultimately our feelings are reactions, they're automatic. So no feeling can be wrong. It's just important to identify what that feeling is. So if you're feeling heartbroken and devastated, that's okay. It's okay. Acknowledge it. Tell yourself, like, you know what? Yesterday sucked. I was really upset about everything. And today's hard too, but tomorrow's gonna be better. I'm gonna make today as good as I can, you know, given the circumstances. Just understand how you're feeling and be okay with it. Okay. That's my first suggestion. What can help? What can help? It can help to talk about how you're feeling, to name it, to write it, to whether it's talking. Maybe you're not a visual person. I'm very visual. So I'm writing every day, all the time. I'm probably one of the biggest journal users ever. I think I've been through 3 since 2020 started, which is like kind of ridiculous, but I write a lot. So writing about it can be really helpful. If that's not helpful for you, maybe it's talking to a teammate on the phone, maybe it's FaceTiming with your teammates, maybe it's talking to your family or someone you love and trust, whatever it might be. It's just really helpful to talk about what you're going through and how you're feeling. So that's suggestion number 1. The other suggestion I have, I'm going to try to share my screen again. Another suggestion that I have for you all is to be able to think in a productive way. So thinking in a productive way can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. And the way that I think of productive thinking, I like to use like a lot of this or that's with my athletes. So the first one, I'm going to go through them all because I think they're all really important. The first one is challenge over threat. So it's easy to look at this situation with coronavirus, with the end of our seasons, with our, you know, our hopes and aspirations being literally ripped away from us out of our control, which I'm still angry about for you all. We can see it as a threat, right? We can see it as, you know, it's a threat to who we are. It's a threat to what's happening next. This is a threat to my happiness, my well-being. Or we can choose to see it as a challenge. I didn't mean to cross it off and then to underline it. We could see it as a challenge. So challenge yourself to find ways to get past this. This is a challenge of who I am. And if you guys remember one of those first slides I talked about, tough times create tough people, challenge yourself to think about this as an opportunity. Here's the second one, opportunity to find ways to get tougher because of this, right? So it's a challenge, not a threat. See it as a challenge to your toughness, a challenge to your mental health, a challenge to your mental skill strength, not a threat to who you are, but a challenge. And the second one I just talked about a little bit, but opportunity over obstacle. When there's an obstacle presented, we can either look at it as an obstacle and think, oh my God, this is the worst thing, or we can look at it as an opportunity to grow, right? I always say it's not winning and losing, it's winning and learning. I know it's kind of a corny phrase, but ultimately this can be a chance for us to seek out the opportunities. So again, priming our minds to find new perspective and to be able to think again in a productive way. The next one, optimism and pessimism. That's a big one for a lot of people. A lot of people self-describe as pessimists, which essentially doesn't help us, right? Optimism doesn't mean that everything's sunshine and rainbows and all is perfect and this is great. I'm so happy that coronavirus is happening. No. Optimism is, I believe that tomorrow is gonna be better. I believe that things will get better and that they'll turn out in a way that's helpful. I believe that I'm gonna get past this. I believe that even when we lose games, we're gonna win some too. So optimism is really just the belief that things will get better. Facts and assumptions. this is one that I want to talk about. So I'm going to flip the screen again. So fact and assumption is something that I'm pretty passionate about, that I've really been focusing on a lot lately. There's a lot of assumptions that are floating around the internet. Social media is something I'm just like, I don't like it. And I think it's wonderful what it can offer us. And hello, look at us right now. I'm able to talk to you all without being with you. That's totally technology, social media, whatever you want to call it. But there's a lot of assumption that's going on right now in the media. And that's, oh my gosh, this coronavirus is going to go through the fall. Oh my gosh, 80% of Americans are going to end up with coronavirus. Oh my gosh, we're going to have to be in our homes for longer than 2 weeks. It's going to be 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. We're going to be just like China. We're going to be just like Italy. There's a lot of assumptions out there. It's really important for us to do our best to help preserve ourselves and our sanity, to focus on the facts, not the assumptions, right? So the facts are that COVID-19 is spreading, right? Italy is having a hard time. Fact. COVID's here. Fact. We're stuck in our homes. Fact. This is going to last until the fall and maybe next year. And assumption. Let's focus on the facts. We're stuck here in our homes right now. Here I am at my home, and that's a fact. So now what can I do with this fact, right? So focusing on the facts, not the assumptions. It's easy for us to get carried away in assumptions of what might happen down the road, but let's try to focus one day at a time and really pay most attention to what we do know, not what we don't know, because that can drive us nuts and we can go down a rabbit hole really fast. And then the last little this or that I like to talk about is adversity and advantage, finding advantages in the adversity. So this is a very difficult situation that's creating a lot of adversity for you all. So it's kind of like opportunity and obstacle. So instead of focusing on the adversity, focus on the advantage of having this adversity. Focus on how mentally tough you're going to be. Think of next year, right? If you're a senior and you're in your job, or if you're a returning athlete and you're in your season and there's one bad game, you lose a game, or you're a senior, so now you're in the real world, and you have a boss who's yelling at you because you made a mistake, you made an error. Those setbacks, those obstacles, they're gonna seem like nothing because you actually experience much worse, right? You become a tough person because you've experienced a lot. And so it's built strength and character in you. So now one game lost, big whoop, right? I've lost a whole season. This is nothing. And I bounced back from that whole season. Right? I lost my last season, maybe as a senior. And you know what? You yelling at me, boss, that's okay. I can handle this. So finding the advantage, this is an advantage for you all to really build your mental toughness. One of the mental skills that I think that athletes do not have strong enough is mental toughness and resilience, the ability to really be able to bounce back from setbacks in an effective way. And so having this situation like this that's out of our control and unprecedented, we couldn't prepare for it. So it's actually the perfect opportunity for us to find ways to get mentally tough and really force ourselves to be mentally tough. So you can see it as an advantage if you choose to kind of train your mind in that way. It takes a lot of work to train your brain to see the advantages and to see the opportunities, but the more you remind yourself of that and the more you kind of build perspective, the better. So it's something to think about as well. And there are a couple more slides that I have on what can help. And one of the, I guess, key what can helps that I want you all to kind of recognize and really remind yourselves of is that it's really important to find your people. And when I say find your people, I mean your family, your friends, your teammates, me, counselors, therapists, coaches, administrative staffs, professors. You all have people who are here for you, right? So find your people. Everyone has someone. You're all watching this recording right now. So that means that you're all in this together. We're all experiencing this loss together. Find your people. You know, they have that phrase, misery loves company. I hate that, but I also love it because it's true. Like when you're struggling, it's a little bit easier to manage when you're with people that you care about, trust, and love, who can support you and who you can support. So find your people. Find the people who are going to help you become the best you. Okay, find your people. I have some photos here now that I want to share of people finding their people. I love this picture. I love this picture of the swim team because it is such a depiction of teamwork, team love, team support. These people are with their people. Their arms are around each other. They're cheering together. They're celebrating. It looks like it was before a match or a race. I think it's a match though, because hair looks dry maybe, but regardless, they're all together and they're loving each other. and they're in it together. That's so important. So again, finding your people. And then here's another one of the women's lacrosse team with their people. Look at this. I love this. I wish I could zoom in. Like just chaos and happiness all at the same time. Finding your people, feeling supported, super, super important, especially in a time like this when we need support. What else can help? This is important for us as we kind of navigate, I talked about these 5 different ways to think about things, but now I want you all to kind of continue to think about that a little bit deeper. So we're diving a bit deeper. And this is where we talk about reframing how we're thinking and how we're perceiving the situation. So reflecting on it and acknowledging how you're perceiving the situation and seeing if there's a way to reframe. So when I say reframe, I mean changing perspective a little bit. So acknowledging this is a new norm, right? This is something that's not been experienced before, and you weren't expecting this to be your spring season or your spring semester at St. Mike's, but it is. And again, this kind of goes into acceptance a little bit, but it's really being able to kind of recognize there is a new norm. And so then you have to ask yourself questions. I have a slide that I'm going to talk about self-reflection a little bit more, but starting to ask yourself, how can the worst thing that has happened to me this year, which might very well be this situation, how can the worst thing that's happened to me actually become the best thing that's happened for me? That's a hard question to ask and to answer. How can the worst thing be the best thing? It's kind of like what I've talked about a little bit with the mental toughness and resilience, right? It's the opportunity to build toughness, right? You've been through shit. Honestly, the fall athletes and winter athletes don't understand. I don't understand what it's like to lose a whole season. I lost 8 weeks of my junior season before in preseason. So I've never lost a season like that. The only people who can kind of understand are injured athletes, but even that, it's not the same. You guys have lost so much. And it's okay to acknowledge how you're feeling, like I've said, but challenge yourselves. Change your perspective, reframe what you're thinking. Instead of saying, this is the worst thing ever, challenge yourself. How can this be a really good thing for me? That's hard to answer, but it's something to reflect on. And again, if you're a pen to paper like me, write about it. Write about it. I'm honestly curious. I would love to hear your answers on Monday. What are you experiencing now that's actually helping you? I'd be curious to hear what some of the responses are that you guys come up with. And then the idea of being able to essentially find areas for improvement. So for you returning athletes, it can be a cool time for you. I mean, the mental skills side of sport is like it's blooming right now. We're in a cool time where the mental health and mental skills of athletes are starting to be emphasized in performance. It's not just physicality, it's not just strength, it's not just skill, it's not just coach, it's our ability to mentally be present. It's our mindfulness, it's our focus, our refocus, our attention to detail, our perspective. What are some areas? Maybe it's even mobility, right? That's physical, but it's something that you probably aren't going to focus on if you were in a full-blown season. But maybe you have really bad shoulder mobility like me, and that's something that you can work on, right? So identifying areas where you would like to see strength happen, and then having intention and setting goals so that you can actually become that. For you seniors who have lost a season, again, a little bit of a different situation. I'm gonna talk to you specifically in a moment, but the idea that you can find areas now that perhaps you want to strengthen. So maybe your confidence isn't that great. Maybe your sport produced confidence for you, and in school, academically, work life, you don't feel as confident. This could be a cool time for you to practice confidence. And I have a lot of tricks and skills and strategies, techniques, exercises that can help with that kind of stuff. So if that's something that you're experiencing and struggling with, confidence, let me know. I'd be happy to help. Confidence is an action, right? People say it's a mindset, but it's actually an action. We become confident when we act confident. So doing little things. So that's why they start with basketball, again, the sport that I know the best. You don't just start by chucking up threes the first time you step on the court for a day. You start really, really close with form shooting, get confident, comfortable shooting. You feel good. You start to slowly move back closer and closer to the 3-point line, further and further from the basket. You start small and build. That's confidence building. It builds confidence with enough practice and repetition. So finding areas where you can actually continue to evolve and improve as a person. Just because your sport is gone doesn't mean that you can't improve. It actually is quite the opposite. Now it's a chance for you to kind of find ways to improve without your sport, something you've always had. So it could be a cool time. Another thing that I want to talk about, and I'm going to go back to the slide in a minute, but I'd rather talk here. Responding and reacting. So this is something, if you're an athlete who's worked with me before, I apologize for the redundancy with some of this stuff, but reacting and responding, that's a differentiation that I think is so important and is not talked about enough. So there's a very big difference between responding and reacting to stress, okay? So something happens. Let's use traffic. It's the example I always give with athletes. You're in traffic on 89, right? It's rush hour, and a car comes off the on-ramp and cuts you off. I'm from New York, and so I can kind of use this excuse a little bit. So I get that like New York, like road ragey feeling. So reacting to that situation, the stressor is that the car just cut me off. My reaction is an emotional kind of just like sets me off, right? So my emotions take over. So no longer am I in control of the situation, my emotions are. I get angry, frustrated, pissed off, annoyed. And so what do? I honk on the horn, I give the finger, I swear, I yell out my window, I'm waiting for them to look at me. What are you doing? Right? I ride their butt. Those are all reactions. That's an emotionally charged reaction, right? So my emotions are what becomes in control in the situation. I lose all sense of myself and control. So in a situation like this experience that we're all in of losing our seasons and being upset, a reaction would be, if you're, again, going back to that slide of thought, feeling, behavior, if you're really feeling sad and frustrated and your mom or your dad tries to talk to you, and if your main feeling is frustration and anger and you're irritable, the reaction is you're just going to start screaming at them. Part of that is okay because you're feeling your feelings, but part of that is also a reaction and you're letting your feelings take over. That's not great, right? So a better, more productive way to handle the situation when you're feeling angry and irritable, we'll go back to the car example when I'm driving and I get cut off. The reaction, again, swearing, beeping, etc. The response is staying in control. So giving myself a chance to pause, deep breath, right? And then really being able to say like, oh, what a jerk, and switch lanes, because I don't want to deal with an annoying person who's cutting me off. I just want to get out of the situation. So again, going back to you being irritable and angry at home and your mom or dad says, hey, how you doing? Instead of exploding on them, take a deep breath. I'm really frustrated right now. I'll talk about this like when I'm ready. That's responding to the situation instead of reacting and just screaming at people who are trying to care about you. It's hard to do. It takes practice. That's why it's a mental skill to respond. Think about like in games too, like if you're playing lacrosse and the official makes some ridiculous call and you get frustrated and upset, it's okay to feel like frustrated and upset, but it's one thing to react and to angrily yell at the ref, get a card and like be sidelined because you exploded and lost your cool, lost your temper. It's another thing to respond, take a deep breath. That was a bad call. I guess I got to make up for it next time down. That's responding. It's hard to do, but it takes practice, and it really does help us in life and on the field, court, etc. And then another thing I like to talk about with responding and reacting is finding ways that you can kind of combat the negative feelings and the negative emotions that you're feeling inside, right? So when you're acknowledging that you're really upset and frustrated and like you can't shake it, you can't just tell yourself to pause and calm down. It's too hard for you. That's normal, honestly. If you're not used to practicing this skill, it's taken me like years to practice this. So if you can't do that, finding activities or things that you can do that can combat the negative, right? So if you're feeling angry and frustrated and you would rather feel calm, cool, and collected, if that's what you'd rather feel, then ask yourself the question, what can I do to feel calm? Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's like sitting in the sun for 10 minutes. Maybe it's reading a book. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's calling a friend. Maybe it's FaceTiming. Maybe it's social media, whatever it might be. Find activities that combat those negative emotions so that you don't just live in the negative emotions. It's easy to just absorb those negative emotions and just live that. But another option that you have here, a choice, is to then do something that can kind of like fight off that and make you feel better. But the choice is yours. So that's why it can help to kind of think respond versus react. How can I respond to the situation? How have I maybe been reacting? How can I kind of help myself get through this? And then, of course, the other part of this slide is building mental toughness and building mental toughness and resilience, which I've talked about a lot in this presentation. So we're going to move on to a couple more things. We're really close to wrap up, guys. Thank you for staying with me. Senior class, this is for you specifically. The first bullet, zooming in and zooming out, that's something that I find extremely valuable and helpful for athletes and all people that I work with. So it's kind of playing around with your perspective and what helps for you the most. So it's allowing you, in a sense, to think big picture and think immediate now and kind of toggle back and forth between the two. So zooming in this situation like we're in is essentially acknowledging like, wow, like this sucks. I'm never going to get out of this like self isolating, self social distancing situation. Like this is the worst situation. Oh my goodness. That's being really in the immediate now. So that might create some anxiety for you. So maybe in a situation like that, it's helpful to think big picture. You know what? In the long run, my sport career does end, but what it's taught me does not. So end of the line, and 25 years from now, I'm not still going to be in this situation. I'm going to be better and stronger because of it. So maybe the big picture helps. For some people, big picture is actually scarier because it shows like, oh my God, the world, like so many people are being impacted by this. And so maybe it's helpful for that kind of person to think immediate now and think like, how can I win this moment right now? How can I make today the best day? So going off of that idea of kind of being present, a good reflection practice is to refocus your energy on perhaps being able to acknowledge all that you have accomplished and all that you have been able to achieve in your time as an athlete, right? And this, of course, is only once you acknowledge how you feel and are okay with however you are feeling. But being able to really spend your attention. I always say our attention, our energy, it's like a bank account. It's finite. We don't have unlimited attention and energy. So we choose how we want to spend it. And so if you're spending all of your time focusing on the fact that you're so upset forever, it's going to be really hard to navigate through this time. But if you can perhaps practice gratitude and practice the ability to celebrate and recognize the positives and all the things that your sport has given you, that can be really powerful for you. And then finally, write about it, talk about it, understand it. Asking yourself what you've learned from your sport career, what you've learned from this experience, getting a season taken away. It sucks. I will say that a million times. It sucks. There's no way to say that it doesn't suck. It stinks. But what have you gotten from your sport? Because what you take with you moving forward is so much more than just like skill on the field or on the court or on the ice or on the mountain. What you take with you are those mental skills, right? The resilience, the toughness, the ability to be confident in situations, be able to deal with stress and anxiety, the ability to be yelled at by a coach and almost demoralized maybe in some situations and still fight back stronger and get better. Those are things you take with you, right? So those are things that your sport has taught you. So reflecting on, what have I learned here? And then being able to essentially allow yourself to feel that you have a sense of control over what you take with you and leave behind. So being able to recognize what your sport has given you and what you want to take with you moving ahead and what you want to leave behind. Maybe you didn't enjoy 6 Ams. Maybe there were certain elements of the sport, structured time, whatever it might be, that you aren't going to miss. It's a good time now to say bye-bye, leave that stuff behind. Like, this stinks, but there's also a lot of good I'm going to take with me moving forward forever. And there's a lot of not good that I'm going to leave behind and say, see, I'm never going to wake up at 5 a.m. again for a workout. Maybe, right? You're going to learn what you can take with you and leave behind. It's up to you, which is kind of cool. So again, write about it, talk about it, understand it, know what you're getting from your whole experience. And then asking yourself again, what can you celebrate? What can you really acknowledge for yourself? What can you pat yourself on the back for? Like, you know what? I have dealt with so much difficult circumstance in my life as an athlete. And that's something that moving forward in the work world, wherever else I go, it's going to help me. And the last suggestion I have for seniors, and again, we're going to have a dialogue and then we're going to have another presentation specifically for seniors, but the understanding that your sport has been a lot to you and it's meant a lot to you, and that's good. That means like you cared. That's awesome. I'm sure you all know who Kobe Bryant is. He unfortunately passed away in January, but when he retired, I was writing my thesis for grad school while he was retiring. So it was this cool opportunity for me. I used him as a case study in my paper. And what I did was that I used his Dear Basketball letter as an opportunity. Again, this word opportunity, you hear me say it all the time, but I used his Dear Basketball letter to show how much his sport has meant to him. So I thought long and hard about him and that letter to basketball that he wrote, the love letter essentially. And I think it's a powerful tool that you all can learn to use yourself. Now, this does not have to be displayed on social media. It can if you want, but it's more for you and your sport. For you to be able to have that conversation with your sport sounds kind of silly, but to acknowledge what it's meant to you, what it's taught you, what it's done for you, what you've done for it, how meaningful it's been in your life. That's something that you can do. I encourage all seniors to write a letter to their sport, dear lacrosse, dear tennis, dear golf, dear whatever. Dear baseball, dear softball. I encourage you guys to do that. Write a letter to your sport and really help yourself process this loss, because again, it's a process. And then I want to go back again to the presentation for a couple last slides. Okay. So photos. Oh yeah, I love this. So here's some more people with their people. I love this, celebrating each other, happiness, and then doing their thing. I see this golfer here. It looks like it's totally raining and yet still celebrating. That's awesome. Ski racer in the middle of a performance, obviously focused and zoned in, motivated to perform. So moving forward into that self-reflection idea again, recognizing what you can ask yourself. So these are questions that I find to be extremely powerful. And this goes so beyond sport, right? Sport has served as a platform for all of us to practice what we're good at, but ultimately to help us really navigate these mental skills that we're building. So I encourage all of you guys to fill this out, right? Whether you're a returning athlete or a senior, this is something that I've been working really hard with all of my individual and team athletes that I work with regularly on. And it's really creating a personal philosophy, right? So what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? Not what athlete are you or what do you want to do on the court or the field, but really what kind of person are you? Are you a hard worker? Are you confident? Are you successful? Are you driven? Are you disciplined? What kind of person do you want to be, right? Want to be. How can you practice being that person every day despite the circumstances? So whether you're in your sport or you're in your quarantine, whatever it might be, how can you practice being the person you want to be? Who are you at your best? Who, not what. Who are you at your best? And how can you practice being that person every single day? And then how can you intentionally get better every day? That's a question I love to ask people. Did I get better today? I ask that question to myself every night when I remember. And it's quite eye-opening when I'm honest with myself. You know, those days when I'm like, you know what? No, I did not get better today. That sucks. But then it teaches me for tomorrow. So did you get better today is not just your sport performance, not just how much you lifted or how many miles you ran, but did you get better, right? So I broke my wrist last year, truly. It's a little scar there. And I was devastated. I was like, oh my God, this is the end of the winter. I can't work out the way I did. But it forced me and challenged me to get better in other ways, right? I worked on my mobility. I worked on my other, limbs. I was able to mentally get stronger. So how can I get better today? It's a really, really great question to ask yourselves. And it's a good little self-check-in that I love to ask myself. I love my athletes to ask themselves. It's really, really a great question. And then the last one that I like you guys to ask yourselves is, what can't Corona take from me? Coronavirus has taken away our seasons. It's taken away our teammates, taken away our college semester. It's taken away our campus, our homes. It's taken a lot away. It's taken away the health of a lot of our family and friends. But what is something that Corona can't take away? I'll give you a hint. Corona can't take away who you are. It can take away what you do, but it can't take away who you are. So it's really important for you to identify who you are so that, you stay with that and that stays with you. That's powerful stuff. Who you are cannot be taken away from Corona. And I think it's really important for you all to acknowledge that. And then the last slide I'll give you, I'm going to skip through some of these pictures just because it's just photos. Here's photos. Doing their thing, pointing out to teammates, being leaders, focused, endurance. Taylor Miller cracks me up in this photo. Here's some of you guys just doing your thing. Absolute focus, attention, celebration. The last thing I want to show is just, oh God, it got cut off. because there's so many, is mental skills that have helped us get through tough times, that our sports have taught us. So these are things, again, that coronavirus cannot take away. Our ability to focus and refocus, mental toughness, staying calm, responding to situations, stress and energy management, self-care, being mindful, talking to ourselves, goal setting, our identity, all of these things that we've developed with our sports or through our sports that help us get through tough times. Don't forget about those things just because our sport is not here right now. Those mental skills are still with you. They're still skills. They don't go away. Just because the sport that taught them to you is gone does not mean those skills are gone. They're still within you. And then the last slide, literally the last slide that I want to share with you guys, if you do need more support and additional support, I am obviously available for any of you who might need me. That's my cell phone number, my email address, and I have Josh Kessler give you guys my information as well. There's Bergeron, there's SMC athletics and coaches and whoever else. And then local mental health professionals. This website down here, you guys, is psychologytoday.com. And if you go there and click on or type in your area code, it'll populate all the therapists in your area. If some of you are working with Kathy or with someone in the counseling center at Bergeron and you're now out of state and you can't, there are therapists everywhere to help. But please let us all know how we can support you. Find your people, find who's going to help you navigate and get through this process the best. It's not going to be an easy process, but it is a process nonetheless, and we can choose to make it one that gets us stronger and better. So please know I'm here for you. Monday night, I'm going to be on a live Zoom call with all of you if you choose to come, and we can have a real conversation so it's not just me talking at you. So please come if you can. I'll have Josh send the link to all of you, but I really look forward to hearing from you all and kind of getting this dialogue continued. Senior athletes, prepare for another opportunity to kind of talk about athletic identity even more in detail and what's happening for all of you. Returning athletes, I'm hoping to also have a presentation for you specifically of how we can bounce back into next year and make it as good as possible. So there's a lot to come. I do want to acknowledge the SMC athletics staff. I will say that they didn't have a spring break, guys. The first moment that we heard about coronavirus and how it's going to impact us, we didn't even know what the impact was going to look like, but those people were hard at work. I met with Chris Kenny over break, and every office was filled. People were there working their butts off for you all. We all care about you so much, and everyone's been working really hard for you. So please, use the support if you need it. We're here. And the support's not going anywhere. This is a tough time for all of us, and I'm here to support you all. So please, I hope this was helpful. I hope to continue to talk to you all, and I hope that you found some sort of nugget in this whole presentation that you can take with you. Again, it's not easy. It's training our minds, which means that it's tough work, but it's worth it in the end. So please ask yourselves how you can get better today. All right, guys, I will talk to you soon. Okay.